Hello and welcome to the Summerlee Museum Tram Depot. Today we're going to show you around our two historic trams, plus our German tram you can see in front of me here. We'll tell you a brief bit about how they work and show you some of the more interesting objects you can see around the tram depot. Our first tram is Glasgow 1017. This is Glasgow 1017, originally built in 1904 for the Paisley District Tramway Company as an open-top double-decker. In the 1920s, Glasgow merged with Paisley District Tramways and they transferred all the trams over to them. In 1925, this tram was converted to a single decker, initially for the Clydebank and Torquay route, but this tram didn't go on this route. It then became the school car and was used to train every Glasgow tram driver until 1959 when the motor school closed. After that, she was then used as shunt trams to be scrapped until 1962 when the system closed. After that, the body was then sold to an enthusiastic canvas line who used it as a summer house. Summerlee acquired the tram in 1992, and after the 9-year restoration of the tram, she officially entered passenger service in December 2003. This is a typical example of an early 20th century controller, believed to date from 1901. The first 4 notches I'm coming up here are what's called series notches. How those work is it gets a 600 volt line voltage, it splits it into 2, it gives 300 volts to each motor. As you go up the notches, more resistors, that reduces the electricity going to the motors, get cut out, so more power can go to the motors. As we go up here, it's the start of what's known as parallel notches. Instead of 300 volts going to the motor each, 600 volts go to each motor, and the same principle applies as I go up the 4 notches. When you bring the controller around this way, this is the emergency brake position. As we turn the handle this way, more power is sent to the motor to put it into reverse. Until we get to the very last notch here, when 2 track magnets are applied, lifting the tram body up and bringing the tram to a striding halt. This other control you can see here is our main air brake handle. Push it forward, it applies 4 blocks to the wheels and brings the tram to a halt. Pull it this way, it releases the air and it takes those same 4 blocks back off the wheel again. This other handle you can see here is the handbrake handle or parking brake. Apply this and it clamps all 4 brake blocks to the wheels and it permanently holds them on tight and the tram should never move. This is Lancashire Tram 53, built in 1908 for the Lancashire District Tramway Company. She was used to run services between Hamilton, Motherwell and Wishaw. This company didn't last very long, ceasing in the 1930s, converting those to buses and becoming Central SMT. The body was then sold to a farmer in Ayrshire. He then used it as a hay store. Summerlee acquired the body in 1986. Restoration started up at Bowness and Canal Railway, and we acquired it in 1988 at the museum itself, where all the trucks, motors and electrical equipment and final fittings were installed. The trucks and the running equipment came from a portal of one of their trams, number 150. She entered passenger service on the 1st of April 1995. She was launched by Helen Liddell, who was MP for Monklands East at the time. She had a very special driver, as on September the 11th 2001, Princess Anne visited Summerlee and she had a shot of the controls at the tram. Hi there, the tram we're currently sitting on is Dusseldorf Tram 392. Built in the 1950s, Dusseldorf Tramway Authority. In 1997 she was converted from passenger service to being a works car and given the modifications you can see here today. She ran as a works car until 1999 when she was acquired by Summerlee Transport Group for £1 Deutschmark, that's 53 pence. She was acquired for the sole purpose of fitting a wheelchair lift to the back of the tram to help people with mobility problems in wheelchairs to get on and off the tram. In 2004, when she was parked outside, she suffered an attack of vandalism. I was restored back to the original works car condition you can see here. At this moment in time, we are currently working on the tram to get her ready for passenger service. This is a typical example of a 1950s German controller. As you can see, it's got no notch marks on it. To operate, you just pull it this way, and that puts you into first notch. As you slowly move up, there's clicking noises coming from the controllers. As you reach here, this is top series, and this is the start of parallel notches. When you go up to here, this is your top parallel notches. If we were driving at this speed, you'd be driving up to 60 miles an hour, which is why we're not permitted to use these notches at Summerlee. To brake, this is slightly different from the other two trams, instead of having an air brake or a hand brake for stopping. This has an electric brake for stopping. And to apply that, you apply it here. The braking notches do have some marks to note where they are. And this is so you can see how much power you're putting into the motor for braking purposes. By the time you get up to these ones, these initially be painted red, but we're repainting these as part of the refurbishment work for the tram. This would be your emergency brake. By the time you're up here, as you can see, it doesn't hold on to this notch very well, as this is your final emergency brake that applies to track magnets. When automatically defaults the minute you let go of the controller. This one's slightly different, so we'll take the main key off. You can lift this one up here, and this cuts motors in and out. As you can see, it's a bit stiff, a very reasons we don't have to do it. That's motor 1 out, and that's motor 2 out. Bring it back in the normal position, you just click it back in this direction, and that gives you your main forward. To reverse, with motors 1 and 2, you pull it in this direction here, and that gives you your reversing notches. We are now standing underneath Lancashire Tram 53. The first large red wooden object you can see is part of the lifeguard mechanism. That's helped used to rescue any passengers that may be unfortunate to be hit by the tram. The first large red metal object you can see there is one of the 2 traction motors which help power the tram at the museum. 600 volts come from the red line equipment and goes through the controls that we showed you earlier. The large wheel you can see is one of the wheels that help keep the trams moving. That large metal object attached to the wheels is known as a brake block. Apply pressure from that using the handbrake or the air brake, and that will help bring the trams to a stop. The large red pipe you can see coming from the top of the tram, or above the tram, through the truck down onto the tracks is known as the sander. Sand is used to help trams brake during wet or leafy weather. Currently standing on the top of Lancashire Tram 53, looking over at the roof of 392. The large metal object you can see there is the pantograph that is used to collect power from the overhead and pass it through to the trams. Those metal coils you can see that look like springs are the resistors we were talking about earlier when we were showing you the controllers. Those reduce the power going to the motors, and as you go up the controller, more power goes to the motors. The object you can now see in front of you is the bow collector on 1017. This is a similar job to the pantograph on 392. The large black metal pole you can see there is the trolley pole. That does a similar type of job to the same as the pantograph and bow collector on the other two trams you have just seen. The tram depot. The object you can see in front of you is the control unit and resistor box off of 1245. The grey object behind the tracks is an old transformer or rectifier used to power the overhead cranes at the Glasgow subway depot. This large object in front of you, known as a switchgear or frame, used to power the Glasgow subway between Copland Road and Merkland Street until the 1970s modernisations. From the back of the tram depot you can see our three trams, 1017, 53 and 392. We'd like to thank you for joining us on our online tram depot tour. If you'd like to find out more about the trams and the transport group, you can go to summerleetg.co.uk.